Hi everyone, it's been a while and I'm really sorry I've not made videos for quite a while on this channel, but if you are subscribed to my other channels you'll know that I've been doing a bunch of stuff there, but I've got a whole bunch of videos now ready for this channel, some really good stuff I'm hoping people will find useful, and I'm sure I'll enjoy doing it and I look forward to your feedback. So this video is about storyboarding. Now, we've already covered a lot about script development and we're not entirely finished there. We'll do a little bit more to do with cleaning up your script a little bit, a few tips on how to get it better, but at the moment I want to move on with some other aspects of pre-production. And a big aspect of pre-production in my mind is storyboarding. Now, if you don't know what a storyboard is, imagine visualising your film and then creating it in the form of a comic book, so that each frame of the comic has the shot that you want with your actors placed or other elements of your shot placed where you want them, and you have a small box underneath which describes what's going on, and occasionally you have a few things written in the frame to tell you where people are moving or about camera movement and things like that. Now, there are a lot of people that argue about the use of storyboarding. Now, if you're going to be like a documentary filmmaker, the chances are you're not really going to make use of storyboarding. You know, you're going to put your film together in the edit, to be honest. But if you're doing a good bit of fiction, storyboarding can be really, really useful, and in many cases it's essential. Now, there are some filmmakers that argue that you don't need a storyboard. For example, one of my favourite directors, John Carpenter, he very rarely uses storyboards. He only ever storyboards if it's a very complicated scene where there's going to be, you know, only one or two chances to capture the shot, so you want to get it right, you want to have everything pre-planned. But normally he just goes in, he's got the script, he's got his crew set up, and they try different things out. Now, that's great, but I think storyboarding is really, really useful, and I'll tell you why. The reason I think storyboarding is at least for myself pretty essential, and for other people, for example, you know, Alfred Hitchcock, he used storyboards all the time. In fact, he felt he had already made his film. He had to make it twice. You know, he had it in his mind and his storyboards, and then he had to actually film it. Storyboards allow you, first of all, the director, it gives you a good way to rein in your production so that you know exactly what's going on, what your film's going to look like, where everybody's going to be. It helps with a whole raft of different things, just with planning basically and preparation. It's also a good selling tool for your film. Now, not necessarily from a monetary perspective, you know, about like selling your film to get funding for it, although it can be used to do that so that you can show someone completely how your film's going to be. But it's a great way to get crew or other people involved in your film and say, you know, this is what the end product's kind of going to look like. Would you be interested in working this? Because sometimes, unfortunately, the script isn't really good enough, or perhaps it's just not visually descriptive enough, because often we try to be minimal with our descriptions in a script, and we want something that visually conveys what it's going to look like. I personally think that it's just a great tool for the director, for the person who's directing the film, to plan out what they want to do. Now, there are two main types of storyboard that you can do. One is drawing. You draw out each frame, or each shot rather, of the film, and the other is using photography, where you photograph the scenes that you want to do. You maybe have the actors in place, or you have people just standing in place where you will want your actors to be, and you put your storyboard together like that. Now, we're going to be dealing at the moment with drawn storyboards, but we will move on to photograph storyboards as well, although I don't really use them, to be honest, but I will be doing them for this channel for the people that are interested in them. Both can be time consuming. But the main thing that you must understand about storyboarding is that there's a complete misconception. People think you have to be good at art or you have to be good at drawing. You don't. Yes, there are some people out there, you'll see storyboards by people like Ridley Scott, and it's just an unbelievable piece of art and it's an incredible representation of what the film's going to look like. But then you look at other people like Steven Spielberg, and he uses a system of smaller, just rudimentary shapes to convey where things are in the shot. Now if you're doing that, you're probably not going to want to give that to someone who you want to fund your film, because they're not going to get much more out of it than they would from the script. But it's really useful for the crew and just for yourself, for the actors. And let's see what else I want to talk about. I have a list. Yeah, so you don't need to be great at art. Yeah, it can help, but a lot of the storyboards that you see that look fantastic are actually drawn up by storyboard artists. You'll see that in films. You'll see the credit, storyboard artist. And often what happens is perhaps the director will roughly sketch, or he'll work with, he or she, don't make me sexist, will work with a storyboard artist to put together a storyboard. Now I've done this a little bit with Alan on area50bun.com. We've worked a little bit on a couple of storyboards because he's a far better artist than I am. He's a fantastic artist. But if you've watched some other channels, you know, or if you looked in the forums for area50bun.com, you'll know that I'm trying to learn to draw, and there's a whole thing with that at the moment. Oh, one more thing before I go. We are going to do some videos using these graphic tablets to draw storyboards on your computer using freeware software. And the graphic tablet that I've got, which is really good, only costs £46, so they're not very expensive. But I'll do a video about them and about the advantages and disadvantages of using them. And just to recap from what I said before, I think it's an excellent way to plan out how your film's going to be. You won't have a lot of time, especially if you're an indie filmmaker, to get the shots that you want to. So if you know what you're doing when you go in there, it can be really handy. That's not to mean that you can't change shots and try things, because sometimes you'll storyboard something and it won't work out, and when you get there you realise, oh my god, I've got to change this. But we'll get to that in the future in other videos. So for now we're going to talk about drawing out your storyboards, and the first video, this one, is about the sort of equipment I think you'll need. So there are a few different ways to draw out. You know, the first is to use pencil, and another one that some people use is charcoal. People also ink their drawings with pen, but normally to begin with you'll just use pencils anyway, and you may go over it with the pen or over it with the charcoal afterwards. So we're just going to talk mostly about drawing with pencil. So here's just a normal pencil, and you can sketch with this. There's absolutely no reason why you can't sketch with this, why you can't draw out a storyboard with this. Absolutely no reason whatsoever. However, I would suggest that one of the first things you pick up is a set of artist pencils, and the reason for that is that the artist pencils help you draw better, and will help develop your drawing skills as you're doing storyboarding, and just overall they'll just make your storyboards look better. So I went and picked up a cheap set of artist pencils. They cost £3.99 from an art shop, and you may also be able to pick these up from other shops, not just art shops. So normally with a set of artist pencils, you'll get a variety of different pencils. Now, it's not really that complicated. The pencils are different in how hard or soft they are, right? So let's take, for example, you get a set of pencils, and okay, here's a 4B, and we'll take, not that one, bear with me. We'll take 5H, right? So you've got pencils that have H after them, and you've got pencils that have B after them. So the H, just think of the H standing for hard, right? Innuendos aside. H stands for hard. B is soft. Okay, now I'll just briefly show you the difference. I don't know, I hope the camera picks this up, it might not, but we'll see. Okay, this is a 5H pencil, okay? So a 5H is quite a hard, rough pencil. And what that means is that the graphite off the pencil comes off, it takes a little bit of pressure, it doesn't come off as easily, okay? So we can draw sort of very thin, darker lines, not darker lines, sorry, we can draw very thin, faint lines with a hard pencil. Okay, so here's the, what one did we go for? A 4B, okay, so a 4B is a softer pencil, and if we look here, you can see that the lines are much darker, they're thicker, and the graphite comes off much easier, and this is good for shading in different areas of your picture. Okay, so we go up, we start off with, say, like a 1H, 2H, 3H, 4H, 5H. The bigger the number, the harder the pencil then. And then likewise with the B pencils, we go 1B, 2B, 3B, 4B, 5B, 6B. By the time you get up to like 9B, that's like a really, really soft pencil, and the graphite just comes off the pencil right away as soon as it touches the paper. Alright, now this is just really useful for shading, which we'll go into, and creating a sense of depth in your drawings. And it's just really handy having them, you know, because you might just start off and you just want to do rudimentary shapes, but in the long run you will get better at sketching as you do this, and you will want to have these here. And like I say, $3.99 I picked them up for. That must be about $5-6. I've got a much better set which cost me about £14, but unfortunately it's over at my friend Stuart at the moment, at Stuart's, and they were what's the name they make, Dali Rooney, I can't remember it, or Rowney, can't pronounce it. They were about £14, so about $17-18, but you can get cheap ones, and really there's not that much difference, to be honest. Okay, so after you've got your pencils, you're also going to want a pad. Now we could go for a hardback pad, which is really good to sketch when you're on the train and stuff like that. That cost I think about £6 or £7, and this one only cost a couple of pounds. Now you're going to say, right, okay, yeah, I know I need to draw on a pad of paper, right? But the paper is actually really important. The paper, drawing paper is thicker than printer paper or writing paper, and it's got a texture to it which picks up the pencil. And it's because of that there's a variety of other things you can do with it, and it just picks up the pencil much better, and is just a better thing to have when you're drawing. Your drawings will look better because of the quality of paper that you have. So that's the pad, only costs a couple of pounds. The other thing that you're going to want to have is you're going to want to have a rubber. Again, you're going to say, yeah, I understand, I need a rubber. Well, if I can find where I was scribbling there. Right, okay, so you obviously have your bog standard hard rubber, which will rub out your lines fine, but you also get these soft putty rubbers, okay? And these soft putty rubbers you can squelch up into balls and knead them to a point. And the reason you do this with these is that they're actually a drawing tool. They're not just used for rubbing out, say, mistakes. They're actually used for taking some, maybe the top level of graphite off of a drawing in certain places, and to help to add with shading. So it's actually more of a drawing tool than something that you use to erase mistakes all the time. Okay, and then obviously a sharpener. I got one of these ones that's just in a little tub just to save on mess, even though I'm pretty messy, but never mind. Okay, so we've got our pad, we've got our pencils, we've got our soft putty rubber, which I think costs about £2. In fact, maybe less, that's a smaller one, so it probably was less than that. And a hard rubber as well, just to get rid of those really pesky lines. And yeah, so we can start drawing. You can also pick up charcoal, and get packs of these if you want to draw with charcoal, but I would really suggest starting off with the pencil drawings. And you can also pick up little packs. I mean, this costs like £7 or something like that. It's got graphite pencils in it, pastels, although most of your storyboards are going to be black and white, and graphite pencils, charcoal, pastels, things like that, and some rubbers as well. Alright, so those are the things you're going to need. You may also want to have, if you want to ink your drawings, make them really stand out, you want a decent pen, black preferably, something that's comfortable, because this is very time consuming. And I think that's all you really need to have. Oh, I was going to say an alternative, excuse me, to your soft putty rubber that's even cheaper is you can actually buy white tack, which you use to put up posters. It's like blue tack, only softer, and it will actually take out lines in a similar way that a soft putty rubber will when you get a big strand of it when you buy it. It's not quite as good though, so you really should get a soft putty rubber, but it will do the job if you wanted to. We've talked about what storyboards are, why we use them, and we've also talked about what type of drawing equipment or utensils, I don't know the correct word, paraphernalia, that's a good word, that you want to get to help with your drawings. Okay, so let's take then a blank sheet out of our pad. So we have our pad, we have our pencils, we have our soft putty rubber, our hard rubber, we've even got some charcoal, pen, the whole shebang. And so first of all we want to decide how we're going to draw out our storyboards. There's a couple of different ways that you can do this. One way is that you can sketch out frames this way. So for example, like a comic book, and have bear with me, and have say 6 of them, to make that a little bit darker for you so the camera can see it. So you probably do this with a ruler, to be honest, if you were separating it out just so you had straight lines, but I'm just quickly sketching this out so you can see. So this would be one shot, this would be the next shot of the film, and then say we'd have another shot here, another shot here, another shot here, another shot here. And what you have is underneath you have a box underneath where you write in what's happening in the frame, okay? And so this is one way that you could do it. The problem with doing it this way is that you're not going to get a lot of detail into the drawings, and I would really only suggest doing this if this is just purely for yourself, and you're not going to really need to show it. If you've got a production where you're not going to need to show it to like crew and actors and things like that, if it's just to keep yourself right, you keep this in a binder. It'd be pretty handy to have all your shots. We build up a shot catalogue, which is something we'll go on to. However, I would really suggest doing one sheet per shot. Now you're going to go through a lot of paper, but you can get in a lot more detail, and when we get to putting this into Celtex, the freeware script writing software that we've been using, where you can actually put together your storyboards, you're going to want to be able to put one sheet down at a time and get one shot at a time, and I'll show you how to do that. Alright, so we've got we want to sort of, even though the sheet is kind of in widescreen format, we want to sketch out, or like I say, we would probably do this with a ruler, although it's got quite a cool look to it when it's just sketched. See, quite a cool look, just a sort of fuzzy, artsy fartsy look to it, I don't know. Alright, that's a bit lopsided, but anyway. Okay, so you have you've drawn a box, which is the frame that you're going to have for your film, and then on the underside where you're going to write what's going on in the frame. Now, when we are using Celtex, there's actually a box for you to type in what's happening, so bear that in mind if you're going to draw this out. You could still pen in, but when you're going to scan this, you're going to have to cover this probably with a little piece of paper so that it's not scanned in with the drawing and you've just got this part. Okay, so alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about using rudimentary shapes. When I talked about like Steven Spielberg storyboarding in our video, and I said to you, look, you don't have to be a great artist. In fact, if you can draw stickmen, then you can storyboard. So let's say, for example, we've got a building. Say we've got a building and we've got a street in front of the building, and we've got one of our characters walking down the street. Well, what we would do is we would just, if we weren't caring about making this look good at all, we would just do the shapes. Now the three or four shapes that you're going to use. You're going to use circle, triangle, square, that's my computer again, and rectangle. Okay, so here we've got a kind of slight rectangle for the building. Very quickly just sketch in some windows so we know what that is, and then we're going to have our street that goes along side the building. Might put some lines in the middle of the street so that we can see that it is a street. And I've obviously made up a mess for the perspective. Okay, so obviously you probably add in more than this. Again, this is just using rudimentary shapes. If you can't draw, right, if you're like me, you're not a very good drawer, then this is a really good way to do it. Okay, so we've got, if we can see this, we've got a building, and we've got this is our sidewalk or pavement, and we've got a street in the front of it. And let's say we've got a character walking down the road. Now you could do a stick man, no problem with that. I'd probably go more with using some shapes to do, which would really be an ellipse, which is an elongated circle for a body, a circle on top for the head, and then a rectangle underneath for the legs. Okay, so there we go. We've got a person there. Now we might add more to it, but really, if you're just dealing with rudimentary shapes, you're not really going to go much further than this. So that's how you would really do a storyboard, using this sort of these rudimentary shapes. Let's say we just have a rectangle there. I know my ellipse. I know I said it was mainly circles, squares, rectangles and triangles, but I mean, you could do a sort of triangle shape for the body, I suppose. But really, all we're doing is trying to convey to ourselves what that is. Okay, we get the sort of shape, and we know that there's a building up there. Not to worry about too much about detail. Add in another And then you could, I mean, you could maybe add in another building across the street. All depends what your location is. If you have one in mind, you should try and have one in mind. We've not talked about location scouting yet, which would actually come before this, but you know, there's plenty of times people storyboard without having the locations in mind or having scouted them. You just want to get the actual shots that you want, and then you can build them around your location scouting. Ideally, you would do your location scouting first, and then you would do this. Alright, so then we would write, you know, downside. Let's say our character's called Mark. Oh, hey Mark. Mark walks down a street, or whatever the directions are in the script. And if we want to convey movement of a character, simple, just a simple arrow showing that he's moving along. Okay, so now what I've done is just as I was talking there about if you want to show the direction that the actor is moving in, you just put a little arrow indicating where he's coming from. I've just went over everything with a darker pencil, softer, remember, for darker lines, and just so it stands out a little bit more on the camera. So if you look at this, it's completely and utterly rudimentary, you know. And all it shows you is there's a building, there's your character, there's a street, and just the description of what's happening. Mark walks down a street. Okay, so this is like as basic as you would really want it. In fact, you can go more basic than this if you want, you know. But I think it's good practice to just use broad shapes, rectangles, squares, circles, triangles to compose the whole shot. So if we look at this, then that's if this is a static scene where the camera's not moving, if the camera's locked off. Now you'll notice that there's nothing here telling you what sort of movement the camera's making. Now some people will storyboard where almost everything is static, and they'll do that just to convey the story. They'll have most of their shots, and then they can decide on the day or on their shooting schedule what sort of movements the camera is liable to make. But if you really want to be precise about it, you're probably going to want to think about the sort of movements that your camera makes as you're storyboarding. Now there are a bunch of different ways to do this, and there's no real sort of standard way. You could put down the description box, you could put a description of what the camera does. So for example, you might do something standard like in brackets you always have the camera movement, what's happening with the camera. Everything out of the brackets is what's happening in that shot. You could also use symbols to indicate what the camera's doing. So you could, for example, it's a softer one. You could, for example, draw on the picture showing somehow where the camera's going. So you may draw an arrow, perhaps just a simple arrow. And then a description underneath, just saying something like perhaps pan left. If you're wanting to pan the camera, when you pan the camera, we'll go into different types of shot, but that just basically means that the camera is still, it's in one location, and then you're moving the camera, pivoting it on where it stood. So I've just put pan left there, okay? And you may you may want to go into more detail. So down here, if you've got it, you might say pan left as Mark reaches the end of the building, or whatever. Now you may also want to do a zoom. Now zooms are a little bit more tricky to do. Now again, there's a couple of different ways you could do this. I would probably draw something coming out like this. Something coming out like that, saying zoom if this was where you want, and then you would draw the shot where you want the zoom to end. So say you could do a dotted line. Yeah, put something in that. So let's say there's another window down there. Just say there's someone in the window. Okay, so we've got the arrow pointing inwards, showing the zoom is going in towards a part of the frame, and we have the window, which is the subject that we're zooming into, and then we've got this box which is showing you roughly where the zoom would finish on the screen. Very good indicator for your whoever's working the camera, or director of photography, or anything like that. You may you may draw them down here, or you may write them down here in your description box at what point the camera does zoom. So you could say once Mark reaches the window, or the zoom then takes place. You can also write things like, for example, slow zoom, fast zoom. Okay, so we have that, and okay, so I've rubbed most of that out, so we no longer have the zoom instruction in the panel, and we no longer have the box indicating where we're zooming to. You may want to have, for example, a tracking shot. Now a tracking shot is when the camera is moving alongside something like that, to either side, okay, moving in parallel. Now if you do that, then you simply just put in, say, two boxes. Just doing this very, very quickly. You put in two boxes. The first box is where the track begins, here, okay, and we would just put perhaps again an arrow connecting the two, or a line connecting the two boxes, and we could just say track left, like that. Okay, so we've got one box here, so say the camera is focused on this section here, and then the camera tracks to the window there. Okay, so that's one way of doing tracking shots. You may also want to do a zoom as you're tracking, and again, pretty simple. Let's say the beginning shot was a little bit wider. All we do is we do this. We put like a sort of triangle shape there, like an arrow pointing down, showing that you're maybe a bit wider here, and as you're tracking left, you zoom in on this panel here. Okay, so you'd obviously probably rub out that pan left and any other instructions you've got. So a variety of different ways that you could do these things. You could put in pans, you could put in zooms, a track, even more complicated manoeuvres. For example, if you just draw an arrow moving in and out, or you could draw an arrow plotting to one point of the screen then to another point of the screen. Saves you from doing loads of different, having to draw each individual frame and then describing exactly what's happening. So as you can see, it's a really simple system on how to do a storyboard, and with this system, you know, you can really almost storyboard everything, and you don't have to be great at art, you know. So just to talk about the description box for a second, you don't have to have it down here. You could have all your instructions up here, or you could write them in the frame if you can fit them, you know, and you've got free reign to basically do what you want, but keep this in mind. As long as you think someone with a fairly rudimentary idea of film could follow what's going on, you don't want to have it so cluttered up that, you know, with all sorts of symbols that someone else can't understand it, unless, like I say, you're doing the storyboards purely for yourself. But if you want your crew members to understand it and have a copy of it and go through it, then you want them to be able to comprehend what you've drawn. Alright, so that's using the rudimentary shapes. There is an even simpler way if you are even more inclined to doubt your drawing abilities, and that is actually not to do the storyboard in first person. So for example, let's say we have a street, and we'll use rudimentary shapes again, a rectangle and a square for a car, and so here we go, pretty simple, just a car there on the street, and your shot is here. Draw a fairly dodgy picture of a camera, and you draw where the camera is going to be on this shot. So for example, let's say the camera was tracking alongside this car as it was moving. Well, first of all, you would draw lines showing where the car is moving, and then you would just draw an arrow like that, just saying track car, or you can have some of the instructions in there, so you can actually place where the camera is in the sort in the third person, you know. So you're no longer seeing exactly what the camera sees, but what you can do, what this does convey, is for your crew and for other people, exactly, it still conveys what's going on. I would still tend to go for storyboarding in the first person, but this is useful. Now the one time that I would use this is if I've got a very complicated set piece to do, right? If you've got a complicated set piece to do, say like an action piece for example, you've got a lot going on, this is really handy, and it can actually complement having storyboards in the first person, right? Because you can map out exactly where everything is, where everything is supposed to be, like a map or a building plan. And then once you do that, you can actually then draw your storyboards, imagining how everything's going to look from the positions of the camera where you're going to have it. So that is also really handy, really handy. Now you might have noticed that when we were doing this, that when I was altering what I was drawing, when I decided to maybe change the type of shot it was, changed it from a tracking shot to a panning shot, you may have noticed that we end up with a lot of mess. You know, no matter how much you rub, you're still going to have the faint lines and mess and sort of smudged marks of other the previous things that you've drawn. So what we do to sort that out is we use an old artist's trick called transferring, and it's really simple, and it's probably something that you've already done in school. It's just tracing basically. So you take your sheet of paper like that, and you lay another sheet of paper down on top of it, and then you can see through it, hopefully, unless you're using really thick paper, or if it is quite thicker, if you get, because the light's quite low in here, if you get another light and shine it on top of it, you'll probably be able to see through. And then you just sketch through on the lines, and just do that with the entire picture. And eventually you'll build up and you'll get exactly what you want without any of the messy marks. Now I've still been sketching there rough because I'm holding this up at the moment. If you're down on a flat surface, you probably just want to do normal straight lines and it will look a little bit better. Now what some artists do is they then build on top of the transferred sketch, so they'll add more detail in. Now that's fine, you can completely do that. Then sometimes what happens is that you add more detail in, shading, which we'll talk a little bit about in a future video, to create depth in your drawing. And then what you'll find is that when they've been doing more shading, things like that, they've been rubbing out here and there and fixing a few things, so they might end up with even more messy marks on their drawing again, so they have to transfer again. So that is quite time consuming. So as you transfer your drawing, you may start doing shading, which we'll get into on a later video, to create more depth and style to your picture. I'm not the best at it, to be honest, but I will try to show at least what I've learned from drawing. But really it's just about covering the lines that you want to use, and sometimes you'll then do a few transfers as you shade and do different things and clean it up and everything. Now this is another thing that you can do, is that you may want your storyboards to be inked, and if that's the case, then take a good pen, black, and trace like I did before, going over everything. The other thing that you could do, although it's not as nice, is that you could go over the lines and then rub out all of the pencil marks. And of course, as we talked about with earlier on, we talked about charcoal, because a lot of storyboard artists use charcoal. We could go over the lines in charcoal. I wouldn't suggest drawing from scratch with charcoal unless you're you know, really skilled. I certainly am not that skilled at drawing, so I would only use a charcoal once to transfer the picture. I think that's us covered most of the points that I wanted to cover on this video. Really, it's storyboarding can seem really time consuming, and that's because it can be. But if you think about it, if you've got, say, like a 5-minute short film, and say you might only have 20 shots, if that, right? You may only have 1 or 2, depending on what you're doing with your short film. It doesn't take that long to actually storyboard. Now once we've done this, we then move on to scanning the picture into your computer. You'll need a scanner to do that. If you don't have a scanner, I would either try to get a friend that has one, or a public library that has one that will let you scan it onto a computer, and then have a digital copy of the picture. When you scan it, it will give you a file, which Celtex I'll show this in another tutorial, where with Celtex you can actually import it into Celtex and then have your pictures where you want them, and then you can actually create a video clip using Celtex to play your entire film on your storyboards, which is pretty damn cool, to be honest. So yeah, storyboards I think are pretty essential. I filmed some stuff without them. It's really just a judgment call, but invariably a lot of the stuff that I film without them, I wish I had storyboarded afterwards. When I get to editing, I'm like, I wish I'd thought this out more. I wish I'd storyboarded this more. But one last thing about storyboarding: do not feel like once you've done your storyboards, your film is set in stone, because it won't be. It really won't be. You will be able to change the shots as you feel. You might film whole scenes, whole bits of your film, and actually have to heartbreakingly ditch it and film something completely different because it just doesn't work. So do not worry about thinking that your storyboard has to be perfect, because that has to be the be all and end all. Just try and get it as close to what you want from your film as possible, and you can then give copies out to different people involved with your production, or people that you're wanting to get involved. You can say, this is what my film looks like. We'll do some more storyboarding videos. As I said earlier, we're going to do some using a graphics tablet, which, to be honest, is a fantastic way to do it. It cuts out a lot of hassle, and even though the graphics tablet costs a little bit, once you have that, your costs are minimal. You're not paying for paper and for pencils and things like that over time may mount up a little bit. And you're not having to pay either for an expensive piece of software. There are freeware, open source software online that you can get, such as GIMP, lovely name I know, which is fantastic. It does most of the things that Photoshop does, and especially for sketching, it lets you do whatever you want. So practice your storyboarding. I would suggest maybe start with a short project with your storyboarding. If you've never storyboarded before, maybe just a few minutes long, and see how you get on with it. And but in your production schedule, I would give yourself a good bit of time to get your storyboards done, at least a few weeks, depending on how detailed you want to get with it. And if you do decent enough, if you do storyboards and you don't think they're up to scratch, but they do convey what you want, if you can find someone else that draws really well and you want your storyboards to look excellent, you could pass your storyboards over to them and get them to do an updated version of them. But really, you just have to convey what your shots are, and then your film just feels real in your head. At least it does to me, when you're sitting staring at a completed script and a complete storyboard from that script. So I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Bye for now.